the action film. During the fabled era that was the 1980s, few film genres had undergone as big of a metamorphosis as this one. Before the decade, the concept of what we now called action films was a bit more ambiguous. There were thrillers, westerns, cop films, adventure films, sci-fi films, and martial arts films. But nothing had really codified the genre to what we now think of it as. That all changed with the arrival of the 80s. During this time, ambition soared higher, the budgets got bigger, as did the muscles of the leading stars, and a new brand for this specific genre was created. Physically and mentally tough, muscular men fighting single-handedly against overwhelming odds, with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of pyrotechnics, squibs, and bone-breaking stunts displayed on the screen for the audience's pleasure. This was when the action film as we know it today had been born. These were films made for summer releases that had a very specific demographic and market in mind. They created a strong formula with tried and tested tropes and cliches, and were produced with budgets that were unlike any films of their kind throughout history. Another genre that attained massive popularity during this time was the slasher movie. These were films made with small budgets that required very little time to make, and had their own formulas and tropes. These were movies with invincible, superhuman killers, systematically killing groups of hapless college students and teenagers one by one. So what do you get when you take a macho, badass, blood and explosion-filled military action movie with a whole team of Rambo-like characters and cross it with the suspense and structure of a slasher movie? The answer, my friends, is the 1987 sci-fi thriller classic, Predator, directed by John McTiernan and written by the brothers Jim and John Thomas. This masterpiece of genre filmmaking sadly went underappreciated in its time, but over time has rightfully gained recognition as one of the all-time action movie greats. For those unfamiliar, here's a quick rundown. Arnold Schwarzenegger plays Major Dutch Schaefer, the leader of a group of elite mercenaries who are given a mission to track down a cabinet minister in Central America who's been kidnapped by local guerrilla forces. Once they arrive in the Central American jungle, they are hunted by a mysterious being known as the Predator, an alien warrior with hyper-advanced technology and weaponry that kills the team one by one for sport and claims their skulls as its trophies. The film is a beloved classic of the genre for many reasons. The cast of immense, muscular Hollywood strongmen, the likes of Schwarzenegger, Jesse Ventura, Bill Duke, Carl Weathers of the Rocky movies, and Sonny Landham of 48 Hours fame are all insanely believable in their roles as seasoned, competent, and incredibly dangerous soldiers. They all have fantastic chemistry with each other, and the film somehow manages to really make you care about them enough for their deaths at the Predator's hands to hit really hard, which is no easy feat to accomplish for an hour and 40-minute long film. Not to mention, every single one of them has a memorable line of dialogue. Every single one.
Get your ears on his feet, get to the chopper! It's a real nasty habit you got there.
Hey! The other day I went up to my girlfriend. I said, you know, I'd like a little pussy. She said, me too. Mine's as big as a house.
Son of a bitch is dug in like an Alabama tick.
You're hit. You're bleeding, man.
I ain't got time to bleed.
And a gift from the chopper. But if it's Central American, I'm a goddamn Chinaman.
Maybe you better put her on a leash, Agent Man.
The only way out of here is that valley that leads to the east. I wouldn't wish that on the broke dick dog.
In addition, the cinematography by DP Donald McAlpine is magnificent. The shots in this movie make the jungle that Dutch's team are trapped in as intimidating and massive in scale as the Nostromo from Alien. Take all the constant low angles, focus shifts, zoom shots and wide shots, coupled with the fantastic musical score from prolific Hollywood composer Alan Silvestri, and you have a film where the setting is every bit as much of a character as the human beings on screen. And last but certainly not least, you have the Predator itself, which has become an iconic movie villain for a very good reason. The visual effects used to create its cloak and its shoulder cannon courtesy of VFX artist Richard Greenberg, hold up beautifully even today. And the creature's design itself is simply one of the greatest visual creature designs in all of film, thanks in no small part to the efforts of creature effects legend Stan Winston. A complete 180 from what it was going to look like, but more on that later. It is because of all these things that it's my absolute pleasure to break down the filmmaking techniques of a couple of noteworthy scenes to illustrate to you just how this film excels in storytelling in so many more ways than its suspenseful and tightly paced script. There will be more to this video than simply that, as I feel the need to provide my own thematic analysis of this film, considering I'm less than satisfied with a lot of the video essays out there that are centered around it.
Hawkins. Oh, Hawkins, you weird, small man. He's the least physical of the group, and more importantly, he's the least dominant in this pack of alphas. He attempts to compensate for his physical shortcomings with overtly masculine sexual bleating. His death at the hands of the Predator mirrors this lack of falsity of sexual prowess. The next to die is Blaine. He's killed by the Predator's main blaster cannon, which cauterizes the wound as it tears through his chest. It rips through the armor and his posturing like it was nothing. He didn't even get to use his massive penis gun.
The same way that Predator condemns America's actions without actually hating the country, it too clearly condemns unnecessary, toxic masculinity.
Bunch of slack-jawed faggots around here.
My video is dedicated to diving deep into the ideas and themes that I know for a fact the filmmakers intended, as well as a few of my own. Not some pseudo-intellectual man-bashing horseshit that some college kids try to inject into this 80s testosterone masterpiece. A couple disclaimers. If you are someone who's never seen this film, which, if the amount of reaction videos is any indication, is quite a lot, there will be lots of spoilers. Also, if you have seen the film but haven't seen it in a while, I would also implore you to see it again before watching the rest of my video, so it'll be fresh in your mind as I go over its various fine details. Alright, now that that's all out of the way, let's get to the chopper! One of the things I personally value a lot in films or any fictional stories is a strong setting. One of the big reasons we as humans enjoy fictional stories so much is because they provide a sense of escapism. A detachment from the real world as our mind is carried away by the prose or imagery of a story into the world it creates. A story's setting plays a critical role in that detachment from reality and mental placement into the story's world, or, as the big brains like to call it, immersion. Everything from the details of the time period a story is set in to the details of the physical location its story occurs in constitutes its setting. And it is my personal belief that the best thing about Predator is not the characters or the plot or the creature, although all of those things are important and brilliantly done, but the very location its action happens in. The great Central American jungle in which Dutch's team are stalked and butchered one-on-one by the Predator has got to be one of the most physically imposing and claustrophobic settings for any action film I've seen. John McTiernan really went out of his way to portray this jungle as being one of the most unpleasant environments imaginable. With the characters neck deep in foliage and trees, and nearly every close-up shot showing them sweating buckets, the environment in this film feels tactile and immersive, which goes a long way in making everything in the story feel personal to the viewer. McTiernan also has a huge fondness for these elaborate crane shots, which glide us elegantly from one part of the set to the other. In addition to all of those things, each scene has absolutely immaculate lighting, the majority of which came from natural light sources, since McTiernan and McAlpine had quite a miserable time trying to get any standard film set lights mounted in the wild and uneven terrain of the jungle. Not only that, but because of the very nature of the jungle being such a visually busy environment, that makes it ideal for the Predator to hide and plan its kills. I noticed a couple of different techniques McTiernan used to maximize the jungle as a setting. First of all, a huge amount of the jungle is filmed from low angles. Almost as frequent are low-angle shots that pan upwards to reveal the towering tree line. These shots make the trees and all the other objects in the jungle look massive, and it makes us as an audience feel small. In a very similar way to the overwhelming size and scale of the Nostromo and the Derelict in Alien, McTiernan and DP Donald McAlpine went into the filming stage of Predator with the clear intention of making these larger-than-life expert killers seem small and unimposing compared to the gigantic maze of trees and bush that they are stuck in. There are several asymmetrical shots of the characters standing on one edge of the frame, with the domineering rainforest occupying all the other space. Another technique used to accentuate the scale of the jungle is the abundance of zoom shots. This shot in particular is one of my favorites just because of how unorthodox yet effective it is at conveying just how huge and complex this jungle is. The low angles and zoom shots also create a sense of gritty realism you don't see a whole lot of in action films. Some shots in this film almost feel like a documentary with how grimy and tangible they feel. I've seen a lot of scholars and critics compare the visual style of Predator to the controversial found footage horror film Cannibal Holocaust, and I think they may be onto something. In addition to the gritty and grounded camera work, I feel like McTiernan clearly meant for there to be a strong visual contrast between the lush, colorful, and scenic jungle and the horrific bloody violence that takes place within it, which is a motif you see everywhere in Cannibal Holocaust. It's a style of filmmaking that makes you feel as if you're walking through the rainforest with the characters. The only high-angle shots seemingly are the infrared POV shots from the Predator's perspective. Side note, the way that the infrared shots were actually achieved was by literally recording them off of a computer monitor attached to an infrared camera, since film cameras back in this time had no infrared filter to use. They put the film camera in a pitch-black van while filming the monitor. Add to that the fact that the film cameras the crew had to use were far more grainy and visually noisy than most film cameras at the time, and also the fact that the crew had to soak the entire jungle in ice water just to be able to see the heat signatures of the actors, and it's honestly a miracle these shots turned out as well as they did. Every explosion, every death, every second of suspense is maximized in the mind of the viewer because of these small details that make you feel like you're in the jungle with these guys. But without a doubt, the technique which complements the movie's suspenseful nature the most is McTiernan's consistent use of focus shifting. There are countless shots where the camera's depth of field or the proximity in which objects remain in sharp focus changes to emphasize different parts of a shot. This shot, where the character of Anna tells Dutch the story of the Predator's history of killing the local indigenous warriors, is a wonderful example. She remains in perfect clarity while delivering this exposition, and when she finishes, the focus changes to Dutch to show his reaction. The constant visual distortions of these shots make this jungle seem all the more oppressive to its principal characters, and it provides an ideal visible smokescreen for the Predator itself, who hides in plain sight using a cloaking device that distorts and warps the world around it. It makes the audience second guess their very eyes and makes it so that when the Predator strikes, you don't see it coming. In my other two videos, I talked about the concept of mise-en-scène, or when every single aspect of a film works in complete harmony and creates something truly special and powerful within that film. In my eyes, Predator's moment of mise-en-scène is the entire climax. Everything from the moment Dutch begins preparing his traps to the moment after the Predator's suicide nuke goes off is film perfection. One of the things that really stood out to me in this part of the scene is this shot, where Dutch is pulling the vine to hoist the log up into the trees. It's a brief shot, but it's damn good for so many reasons. For one thing, Dutch looks tiny as he sits in the middle of the frame, directly in between the two logs that he fastened with spikes earlier. It's almost like he's in the mouth of some great monster. I don't think McTiernan and Donald McAlpine filmed this specific shot purely for aesthetics. It's symbolic of Dutch's predicament without being blatant or on the nose about it. The fact that such a great shot is as short as it is really speaks volumes to McTiernan as a filmmaker. He's not concerned with showing off his cinematography just to boast about how good of a craftsman he is. He's content with letting his shots last as long as they need to before moving right along, because he cares more about the story he's telling than stroking his ego. We then cut to the part where we see the Predator tearing the spine and skull from Billy's body. Quick anecdote. This scene always disturbed me when I was younger because of this gorgeous long shot where we see the jungle hunter kick Billy's skullless body from the treetops. I always imagined what Billy's corpse must have looked like with no skull or spine, and it always made me lose my appetite. That's what makes this part so effective. It's gory and disgusting, yes, but it's not gratuitous. There's a lot you don't see as well. We cut back to Dutch crafting some primitive weapons in what is effectively a montage, or a sequence of events that's condensed into a short amount of time through various editing techniques. But whereas montages in most films use basic transition techniques such as cuts, cross-dissolves, and the like, this part of the scene does something creative and uses the trees in the foreground to transition to different parts in time where we see Dutch making more and more tools and weapons, keeping the atmosphere and tension intact. My favorite bit of editing is this moment, where we dissolve from the Predator's caressing of its newest skull to Dutch applying the mud to his face. Notice how Dutch's head is in nearly the exact same spot in the frame as the skull that the Predator was holding. This is yet another subtle cue that despite Dutch's determination to take the fight to the jungle hunter and take it out, he's still in mortal danger. It's not something you see in a lot of films, having these moments to generate excitement for the main hero taking initiative to fight back against the bad guy, while still reminding the audience in very subliminal ways that the bad guy is still a huge threat. Once Dutch acquires the Predator's attention by giving his epic primal yell, he scurries back into position, and eventually we see the payoff of the consistent focus shifting up to this point. An extreme close-up of Dutch where the jungle hunter creeps up dangerously close. I love this shot where we see Dutch's eyes distort inside the translucent silhouette of the Predator's cloaked body. Also, another side tangent. How is it that the cloaking effects for this film look better than the cloaking effects for all modern Predator films, including the new one? How is it that something so simple as rotoscoping the anamorphic silhouette of a guy in a goofy bright red suit into a shot with a wider lens produces a way more convincing result than modern day computer graphics that are supposedly capable of showing anything? Anyways, rant over. We get a nice series of shots that build and build and build tension and anticipation until Dutch fires an explosive arrow at the jungle hunter, which permanently shorts out its cloak. All of that excellent and slow build up to an explosive climax where we are graced with some absolutely jaw-dropping long shots of the Predator's shoulder cannon wreaking havoc. The long shots of these firework displays are clearly meant to show that despite landing a clear hit, Dutch is still vastly outmatched by the firepower of this cosmic hunter. This is visually showcased again in another brilliantly composed shot where we see Dutch desperately hobbling for cover as the Predator stands perfectly still in the background above him, sending roaring bolts of plasma crashing all around him. The editing keeps this scene gripping and tense, and contrasts our two main players nicely. First, we see Dutch limping away due to his wounds, only to juxtapose his desperate flight with a series of shots of the Predator effortlessly leaping from rock to rock in a stunning display of athletic agility from suit actor Kevin Peter Hall. Notice how the shots of both characters show them heading in the same direction in the exact same sides of the frame. But when Dutch arrives at the bridge, the jungle hunter appears there at the opposite side. We then cut to a very elaborate crane shot that moves under the bridge to reveal Dutch hiding underneath, rotating a full 360 degrees, and then comes out the opposite side of the bridge, showing the Predator walking into the same direction Dutch just came from. The next shots show Dutch grabbing a couple of spears and looking at the very same tree line the Predator just wandered into before throwing rocks and spears in order to make the creature give away its position, which it does, allowing for Dutch to land another successful hit. At no point during any of these events are you ever confused as to where Dutch and the Predator are in relation to each other. This is one of McTiernan's gifts as a director. Through a sharp sense of editing and shot framing, he can easily paint a visual and organic image of a location in the audience's mind, and more importantly, make it easy to know where the characters in the location are in relation to each other. This amazing sense of geographical continuity is present not only through various other scenes of Predator, but in the other films McTiernan has directed, like Die Hard and Hunt for Red October. This goes back to my point on why setting is so important. For an action film, you especially need a setting with a strong sense of geographical coherence, because otherwise the action within the film becomes impossible to follow and enjoy for the audience. This very thing is one of the reasons why Shane Black's 2018 sequel, The Predator, was such a crime against the art of cinema. This movie did not give a flying fuck about establishing any type of coherent stage for its action. The lab they were experimenting on the fugitive Predator in was the same location that all the main characters were sitting inside this bus? And now the Predator is loose and you're only now showing us this? Coherent and consistent geography is crucial for films, but it is especially crucial for action films. When the locations of the characters have consistent continuity, it makes the physical struggles between those characters easier for the human brain to visually follow, which facilitates the process of the cathartic, dopamine-filled fuck yeah moments you get when you see the protagonist put up a fight against the bad guy as you follow them from the logical beginning, middle, and end of a fight. We cut to a wide-angle lens dolly shot of Dutch strutting victoriously towards where the Predator was perched, making him look big and mighty as he currently has the upper hand against his adversary. Dutch sees a trail of glowing green blood. Now the tables have turned, and the jungle hunter is the one running away wounded. We also get this badass line.
Bleed, bastard.
As we get some POV shots from Dutch's eyes, mirroring the famous infrared shots all throughout the film from the Predator's eyes, visually confirming Dutch's advantages in this part of the scene. The scene slows down a lot as Dutch crawls into a small cave. The suspense begins to rapidly escalate as, like before, we get another up-close shot of Dutch's face that changes focus to display another visual indicator of the Predator's presence. The tribal percussions of Alan Silvestri's phenomenal score provide a perfect auditory match to the bright green blood eerily trickling down the cave wall. Dutch quickly lights a flint torch that sets off a chain reaction, and like before, we get another explosive climax with more visually spectacular shots. Brilliant visual storytelling, breathtaking and effective cinematography, top-tier physical acting, top-tier music, and a masterful grasp of shot and character geography make this one of the most expertly crafted third acts of any film I've ever seen. And that's not even getting into the final 10 minutes. One thing about this film I touched on briefly that I would now like to shed more detail on, that I personally feel doesn't get enough praise, is the Predator itself. More specifically, the visual design and the incredible physical performance by suit actor Kevin Peter Hall. Hall's acting as the Predator is probably some of the best monster acting in any film, simply because of the way he moves when he's on the screen. Look at this shot when he slams Arnold against the tree by his throat. Look at the way he swings his other arm wide as if he's flexing his alien muscles in some show of bravado. If you look hard enough, there are tiny details like that in most of the shots that show the Predator. Look at the way his hands move as he's removing the seals from his mask here. He splays his fingers out before curling them to remove the seals. Look closely at the way he discards his shoulder cannon. Notice how laid back and indifferent his posture is. He's tossing this big heavy weapon of his aside like it's just a piece of trash. Or how about the scene where the Predator is treating its wounds? Notice how he handles all of his medical tools with competence, like he's done it a bunch of times before. My favorite detail is when he cuts deep into one of his wounds and then suddenly grabs hold of it in reaction as he roars in pain. One of my favorite shots is this one. Right after the unmasked Predator just beat the shit out of Dutch like a redheaded stepchild, we get this amazing brief shot of Dutch crawling towards the camera, and the Predator rapidly sprints up the hill like some crazed rabid animal, and then all of a sudden just stops and begins to walk slowly. All of these details and all of these little touches that Kevin Peter Hall does add up to the point where the Predator is really not a monster, but a full-fledged character in and of itself. Hall would go on to portray the City Hunter in Predator 2, and his performance in that film is just as good as in the original. In my honest opinion, Kevin Peter Hall is the single greatest actor to have played a Predator. And the reason why he was so great is because he somehow managed to find a way to strike a perfect balance between exaggerating his body movements to express the creature's emotional state, while still incorporating enough creepy, weird, animalistic postures, movements, and mannerisms to still make it feel alien and creepy. And he did all of this while possessing the immense physicality needed to pull off the action sequences with no sign of physical impedance from the suit itself, which is something that most actors who have portrayed a Predator since have had pretty big issues with. With Hall in the suit, the Predator feels like a living creature, not a man in a suit. It's honestly a miracle that the filmmakers hired this guy, as he was not only a radiant beacon of wholesome optimism and joy on the set.
That's your lollipop gift. Okay. You can't breathe for 5 hours.
Wait, I gotta take a deep breath.
Oh, quit playing.
I am Predator, master of the universe.
What is you?
But he really knew his shit when it came to not only the physical part of his job, but also the mentality of it. He wanted to get into the mind of the Predator and obsess over the details of the character.
Every part you take on proposes certain kinds of challenges, and being in the suit makes other kind of challenges because you wonder how much of your performance is actually going to come through. Most people think that when you prepare for a role for this, it's mostly just physical. It's mostly just jogging and push-ups and movement, and all of that's very important. Endurance is very important to be inside a suit. It's very hot, and it's really rough work. But there was also a lot of thought into what kind of movement, what kind of planet he came from. You work on the inner things that are going on in the character, just like as you would in any character, in the suit or out of the suit.
Of course, Hall's amazing physical performance is only half of the equation. The other half, of course, being the incredible and iconic visual design of the creature itself. The Predator, or Yautja for all of the nerds out there, simply has one of the greatest visual creature designs in all of film. One big reason why is because its appearance keeps you guessing until the very end. When you first see the creature, it's covered in its cloak, which makes it appear to be some kind of phantom. And then when it exits its cloak, we see visible organic-looking arms and legs, but its face is hidden under a completely inhuman, expressionless mask, which makes you think maybe it's some kind of robot or cyborg. It's not until the last 10 minutes that the jungle hunter removes its mask, and we're given the privilege of gazing upon its monstrous visage, courtesy of creature effects legend Stan Winston. I guess now is the time to tell the story of how the Predator came to be the dreadlocked, mandibled, ugly motherfucker we all know and love. During the initial phase of production, the Predator looked very different. It was a more monstrous and bulky design with massive arms, a massive chest, and a massive neck with a canine-looking head and canine-style digitigrade legs that proved to be completely impractical for all of the acrobatics the creature was meant to display in the jungle. By itself, I won't say it's a bad design, and the guy who designed it was none other than Richard Edlund, who worked on the visual effects for movies like Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Poltergeist, and way more. But it doesn't fit at all with what people would associate with an intelligent, technologically advanced, and ruthless alien race. What didn't help was that this wasn't even the version of the creature that the cast and crew got to see. This was. Because the creature spends most of the film concealed in its cloaking device, the effects crew had to make an alternate version of the creature's suit that was all red, so it could contrast against the background of the jungle and facilitate the process of keying it out to create the invisibility effects. Even knowing that, there was no getting over the fact that the monster just looked terrible. It was really hard for the filmmakers to come to grips with the fact that there was this team of insanely capable military badasses fighting against what looked like a giant bipedal lobster. The actor wearing the Predator suit was none other than martial arts film legend Jean-Claude Van Damme, who at the time was a complete unknown. This was before he got famous with the release of Bloodsport the following year. The way Van Damme himself described the experience, he said it was complete hell for him. The crew treated him like shit because his suit was so ridiculous, and he was offered the role not even knowing what the film was or what type of character he would be playing. He would pass out constantly while wearing the suit because of the intense heat of the Mexican jungle and how stuffy the suit itself was, which according to him was the reason they eventually ended up firing him. Apparently, the only reason he was hired was because of his martial arts prowess. Because I guess being good at martial arts automatically means you're qualified to wear a monster suit in a movie that takes place in a smoldering hot rainforest. Yeah, definitely not the best calls on the filmmaker's part. What was a good call was what happened next. Schwarzenegger himself suggested that they hire Stan Winston, whom he had worked with on the original Terminator. According to Winston's own accounts, the first seed for what would eventually become the final Predator design was a painting of a Rastafarian warrior adorning the walls of producer Joel Silver's office. The dreadlocked tribal theme would lay the foundation of the creature's look, and the now iconic mandibled tusks came from a suggestion during a plane flight with filmmaker James Cameron. Add to that the design of the creature's armor, which was completely absent from the original Richard Edlund design, and the hiring of Kevin Peter Hall, who had vast experience with playing monsters on film, such as the Sasquatch Harry from Harry and the Hendersons, and another alien trophy hunter in the 1980 B movie Without Warning, and you have what is one of the greatest last-minute changes to any film's production ever. If all the tension and all the suspense building culminated in the reveal of this, the film would have been a disaster. But because the filmmakers gave a shit enough to change this one huge detail of the film was saved, and it became a classic, and it gave us an iconic creature of sci-fi that endures to this very day, for better and worse. And that brings us to the end of this half of the video. Now I'm going to do something that's a bit irregular for the intended purposes of these videos. I'm actually going to analyze the writing, specifically the subtext of the plot and the very possible themes it delves into, while also offering my own personal perspective on the meaning of the Predator character itself. I firmly believe that Predator is more than just an action film with a cool alien bad guy, explosions, and one-liners. I'm not saying this film achieves the depths of something like 2001 or Fight Club or anything, but I do think there is definitely a good bit more to think about than just the film's plot and how it executes it. Now, one could make many parallels between this film and Vietnam. It certainly doesn't take a genius to see them. A bunch of American soldiers in a gigantic labyrinthine jungle being picked off by an unseen enemy, I think definitely taps into that zeitgeist of a culture that was only a decade separated from the real-life conflict in question. But what I really wanted to delve into was the film's eponymous antagonist himself. A lot of the ideas I'm about to share regarding the Predator may come across as being reachy on my part, and were likely not all intended by the filmmakers or Stan Winston. But the fact of the matter is, there are quite a few coincidental similarities between the things the Predator does and some of the smaller details of its design, and several real-life things that are relevant to the themes of the movie itself. These are all ideas and parallels I see whenever I watch the film and see the creature. If you don't agree, that's perfectly fine. But I ask that you keep an open mind and hear me out. Okay? Okay. Let's proceed. The one thing that I personally love about the Predator character that makes it so unique among other sci-fi creatures, that I also feel like some of the sequels have utterly forgotten about, is something that I've previously said, in that the Predator is not a monster, it's a sentient and intelligent being. And its motivation remains one of the most unique things about it. It's not trying to take over the world, it's not trying to wipe out the human race, it's not a mindless alien animal killing for food or protecting its territory. It hunts and kills dangerous and cunning prey for personal enjoyment, an alien big game hunter. It's like a science fiction version of the famous short story The Most Dangerous Game, about a man marooned on an island who meets a Russian big game hunter named General Zaroff, who's become bored of hunting dangerous animals, so he entertains himself by hunting people. There are quite a few similarities, with the jungle setting, the main character's reliance on primitive traps, even including a log trap like in Predator. I have no doubt that the story and its film adaptations served as a strong inspiration despite the huge differences. The main one, of course, being that Zaroff is a human, whereas the Predator is, of course, an alien. Though that brings me to my next point. Despite the Predator being an extraterrestrial being, its desire to hunt for pleasure is a very relatedly human trait, almost to a very uncomfortable degree. Sure, there are humans that hunt deadly animals, but some humans are deranged to the point that they stalk and kill other humans. I'm talking, of course, about serial killers. The brutality with which the Predator kills the main characters goes beyond simply hunting game. The way it psychologically attacks its prey in scenes like the death of Dylan definitely evokes similar tactics used by real-life murderers. One example being David Parker Ray, who would trap women inside his death trap-filled trailer for weeks on end before killing them, while verbally insulting them and taunting them via recorded videotapes. Even more so, serial killers are notorious for verbally taunting the police who chase them, like the Zodiac Killer and Dennis Rader. And I think this was a very deliberate parallel with the scene in Predator 2 where the city hunter taunts Danny Glover's character Harrigan by hanging his slain partner's necklace in front of him at the cemetery where his partner was buried. The collecting of skulls and human body parts as trophies is also a very common trait among serial killers. Most notably Ed Gein, who kept all manner of human body parts from his victims and corpses he would steal from graveyards on a regular basis to use as household decorations. Ed Gein also skinned the corpses of his victims and the bodies he robbed, which he also shares in common with the Predator. Skinning people alive and dead is a pretty common atrocity among humanity, from Jeffrey Dahmer to Vlad Tepes. It's also not a coincidence that the character who discovers the skinned corpses is Billy, the Native American, considering the history that Native Americans have with scalping their enemies and prisoners, which was also a form of trophy collecting. Even more relevant to the film, soldiers throughout human history have collected trophies from the remains of their enemies, even though nowadays that's a practice that's hugely frowned upon. And for the sake of covering my own ass and trying not to offend any veterans who happen upon this video, it was definitely something out of the norm for soldiers of any time period to do, and I mean no insult or offense. The fact, though, still remains that a big way that we rank a soldier's prestige and quality is from the amount of confirmed kills they have. I know that's not the only way, but it is a way. These are simply observations, not indictments. The deeper lore of the Yautja culture is the very same. Predators become blooded and gain rank and power within their society by how many high-value targets they kill. My greater point here is that the line that divides the Predator from the characters in the film is not all that thick. Hell, even looking at its weapons and armor, you see familiar themes to human armaments and armor. The Predator's armor feels like a mixture between tribal, Western, and Eastern warrior cultures. Obviously, its sandaled feet and dreadlock-like head tentacles evoke a very primitive African or Viking influence. But the mask it wears makes me think of all kinds of headwear from different cultures. The rectangular shaft in the center of the mouthpiece makes me think of a Spartan helmet. And the black-colored eye slits remind me of the eerie, black-looking eye slits of a Roman cavalry mask. When we look at the weapons, more similarities emerge. The wrist blades have parallels in many cultures, from China, Japan, to once again gladiatorial Rome. The iconic shoulder cannon, or plasma caster as it's known as in the lore, appears almost like a stereotypical alien laser gun. However, the presence of a triangular laser sight gives the weapon an intimidation factor similar to that of real guns. In the other films, we see Predators using the combi stick, which is essentially a spear, which is one of the most ubiquitous melee weapons in all of human culture. Still not convinced? Well, how about the fact that the Predator has a fucking nuclear bomb strapped to his left arm? Now, it's never explicitly stated in the movies or any of the lore whether the Yautja's self-destruct bomb is actually nuclear, but the aftermath it leaves behind, including the presence of a damn mushroom cloud, I think makes the parallels more than obvious. One of my favorite moments from the original film is this one.
What the hell are you?
The way I always interpreted this scene was that Dutch hesitates in finishing the Predator off because he's simply awestruck by its hideousness. His face contorts into a grimace as he asks,
What the hell are you?
This question clearly holds spite and condescension as a way of expressing how repulsive he finds the Predator to be. It's a means of othering the creature, trying to dissociate any type of identifiable humanity from it. The Predator echoing Dutch's question back at him, I believe, is the writer's way of kind of acknowledging Dutch's hypocrisy. They're both a lot more similar than Dutch would like to admit. Granted, Dutch and his teammates don't hunt for sport, but it's clear in a lot of the early action sequences that they enjoy and revel in the death and destruction that they cause, which is the main thing they share in common with the jungle hunter. That's personally the way I always like to perceive the Yautja as a concept. Whereas most people see them as just a really cool alien bad guy, which there's nothing wrong with that, I see them as a thematic symbol of humanity's violent past. In sort of a similar way, people see the xenomorph as a symbol of sexual fears. I don't think it's a coincidence that the demon who makes trophies of men exclusively chooses to kill only the most violent and deadly humans, and chooses to leave the unskilled and unarmed ones alone. A lot of these themes actually get explored in the video game Predator Hunting Grounds, specifically in the audio tapes that got released with the downloadable content for Dutch.
Whatever it was, the demons who make trophies of man, the devil of the trees, or the skull taker, the stories always began on the hottest summer that they could remember. Everything else confirmed the truth of the stories. Proud warriors skinned and hanged, skulls and spines ripped from their bodies. Maybe it was obvious from the beginning, but it wasn't until I heard the stories that I truly accepted the purpose of these mutilations. I mean, they're taking trophies. They travel impassable distances to hunt us, skin us, and mount us over some alien fireplace on another world. It would be disgusting if it weren't so familiar. My first failed mission in a long time. Are we going about this wrong? I mean, we've learned so much, but in doing so, have we made ourselves a bigger target? I can't stop thinking about something Napoleon said. You must not fight too often with one enemy, or you will teach them all your art of war. I started this believing that we were learning how to hunt them, or maybe she let me live to just be hunted another day. We were teaching them how to hunt us. I worry about the future. The Earth is seeing unprecedented rise in heat and war. As the climate changes and the temperatures go up, more and more countries are becoming hunting grounds. We've killed so many of their kind, but they only send more. The number of events that we've witnessed has increased threefold in 10 years. We have made an impression on them, but not like we had hoped. We wanted to show them that we weren't prey, to deter them from ever sending another hunter to our world. We sent a warning, but they took it as a challenge. I fear we have made things worse. If the predators ever decide that we've grown too bold, I have no doubt that they could burn the earth and all of humanity with it. My only hope is that while they waste their time on sport, we can rise up together and stand against them as a species.
If you're a Predator lore fan, I recommend listening to these tapes, as they're very well written, and I think they should have served as the basis for a Predator sequel film. I think all these ideas I've been talking about, along with the ideas that the tapes themselves present, about the relationships between the humans and the Yautja, being that to them we're little more than livestock for them to hunt, and if they wanted to overpower us and wipe us all out, that they could, and that the only reason that they don't is that we present a consistently fun challenge for their sick trophy hunting games, is an amazing idea that has been teased at in some of the sequel movies, but for the most part has been thoroughly unexplored. Instead, we get trite plot lines about different subspecies, predators trying to evolve through stealing autism, and movies about stupid predators having difficulty fighting small, skinny Native American girls. Yeah, sorry, I didn't care much for Prey, but that's probably a topic for another video. If you disagree with my take on the character, that's fine. I'm not saying that my interpretation is the objective best one by far. I do, however, think that some of the things I brought up here hold some water. A lot of people have pointed out already how this film deconstructs the 80s Rambo-style action film, which I think is fine and good, but that's a concept that's been talked about before a bunch already. For me, the main thing that's always been the main attraction is how well this film utilizes the jungle setting and the lethal and fearsome alien killer that lurks within it. And I hope that with this video, I helped you understand my point of view a little better. Well, that's it for this video, folks. I apologize for the long wait, and I certainly hope that this video proved to be worth it in the end. If you wish to help me crank out videos at a faster speed, please consider joining my Patreon, and also liking and subscribing. I promise, if you do one or all of those things, then you'll be a goddamn sexual tyrannosaurus, just like me. Be well, my friends.